I have had a fascination with this training sword for some time. I knew that it had some sort of function, and I have figured that out. You hold it by the base and swing it for the hilt strike. I don't I don't even know if power swords have a sharp edge. I think they rely completely on the field. I'm not sure, but if you ever did find a Space Marines power sword, that would be how you would use it. You would not hold it at the hilt. You would hold it at the blade, provided it didn't chop your fucking hand off. But it would probably be blunt by the time you got it, anyways. There's no way you would pry it out of the hands of a dead Space Marine before another Space Marine backhanded you. I am so happy that this sword finally truly has a place at my side. Surely enough, he could see fire teams ahead of them, swinging around static weapons platforms that would tear their vehicle to shreds. Warriors, engage! He shouted over the Vox. Space Marines who had been waiting for his command rose from behind the shelter of the trailer's sides and opened fire, bolter shells raking the gunners of the weapons teams and ripping their guns to pieces. The bulk hauler crashed into the trench lines, plowing a huge furrow in its wake as it slowed going across the softer ground. Yelling soldiers leapt from their trenches, but there was no refuge to be found, as the massive weight of the hauler collapsed and buried the trenches and scores of men beneath tons of earth and rubble. Uriel watched without compassion, relishing the destruction they were causing. He fired his weapon into the soldiers, yelling encouragement to the other Space Marines of their warrior band as they killed the enemy. He looked up in time to see a brilliant flash of light and ducked as a huge explosion hammered the ground beside them. The bulk hauler swayed, and for a moment Uriel felt sure it would tip over. But the Emperor was with them, and the hauler righted itself, slamming back to the ground with teeth-loosening force. Uriel pulled himself upright and saw several artillery pieces aiming for them, with their gun barrels lowered. Another explosion burst next to them, showering the hauler with debris and earth and smoke. The gunners were finding their range, heedless of however many of their own men they killed. Everybody off, now! He shouted. After two such close calls, none of the Space Marines needed any such encouragement. They clambered over the sides of the bulk hauler and leapt from the vehicle. Uriel saw Pausanias hit the ground and roll, and hauled open the driver's cab. Vanes, come on! It's time, let's go! He shouted over the din of gunfire and explosions. Go! He shouted. I am right behind you. Uriel nodded and vaulted from the platform outside the cab. He hit the ground hard and rolled, smashing a dozen soldiers aside as he landed. In a heartbeat, he was on his feet, slashing with his sword and running from the mountain. Shots kicked up dust around him and ricocheted from his armor as he ran. He saw Adric Vanes leap from the driver's cab as a shell from one of the guns finally struck the bulk hauler. The engine section vanished in a sheet of flame, and the wreckage plowed onwards for another few seconds before exploding with the force of a cluster demolition charge. Secondary explosions quickly followed, as fuel bladders and seed shells cooked off in the huge blast. Uriel realized Vanes must have used those last few seconds to guide the hauler towards a valuable target before escaping the cab. The earth shook as shells arced through the air, and burning sheets of fuel sprayed in all directions. Enemy soldiers ducked and ran for cover, as the maelstrom of exploding shells and blazing plumes of scorching fires engulfed everything. But Uriel and the Space Marines kept running. Ahead he saw the lower reaches of the mountain, where Berosus' engineers had constructed vast rails onto the rock and climbed them towards the air to the higher peaks of the mountain. A giant, angled car bounded by iron railings ascended the rails, bearing hundreds of the iron warriored soldiers toward the battle high above. Thousands of soldiers clustered at the base of the mountain, awaiting their turn to travel up the mountainside and join the assault. The sounds of explosions and gunfire were nothing new to them, and they had not yet noticed the charging space marines behind them. Uriel saw Pausanias and Vanes up ahead, and called them over the Vox. "The platform, on the right! There's an empty car just coming down. We need to take it!" "I see it," replied Vanes. The space marines of the warrior band struck the milling soldiers like a freight train, cutting down scores in the first few seconds of their attack. Grimly, they forced their way onward, hacking, cutting, slaying their way in an orgy of bloodshed. Caught unawares by the killers in their midst, the soldiers fought to get out of their way, and Uriel soon found himself with a clear run to the platform. Vanes was there before him, and had already killed them a path to the approaching car. Uriel took the steps to the platform two at a time, glancing over his shoulder to see the rest of their warriors right behind them. Keeping low to avoid the worst of the gunfire directed at them, the car docked to the platform with a huge, ringing clang, and barely had it done so before the space marines swarmed over it. The car was empty save for a gray-fleshed servitor creature, fused with the mechanism of its controls, whose only function appeared to be pulling the levers that sent it up or down the mountain. Uriel and Pausanias, together with Kai Mache, moved to the edge of the platform and fired into the approaching enemy soldiers, whose courage now began to return. "Ventress! Come on! The car's leaving!" Uriel slung his bolter and slapped the shoulder guards of his two companions before running to the car. Grinding cogs and wheezing engines lifted it from the platform, but it was slow to get moving, and Uriel clambered aboard it. He turned to help Pausanias, gripping his silver arm and hauling him up, noticing with surprise that it was utterly pristine, without so much as a scratch on it. How could that be, when his own gauntlets were torn and battered to the point of uselessness? Pausanias moved past him to take up a firing position at the railings, and Uriel turned to help Kai Mache aboard the moving car. Small arms fire sprang from the sides of the car and railings, but as it rapidly picked up speed, they were soon beyond the range of the soldiers' rifles. Uriel glanced over at Pausanias before transferring his gaze to the mountain above. Black, smoky clouds wreathed the higher slopes, lightning and explosions flaring in the darkness above the battle above. "Well, we're here," said a breathless Vanes. Uriel turned to watch the swiftly diminishing ground as they rose into the clouds and darkness swallowed them. "Get here! Getting here was the easy part," said Uriel. "Now we have to storm the fortress." They say that you should only write about what you know about. I don't know who says that, actually. I guess I just said it. I guess I'm they. Maybe just that phrase itself. I would agree with it, and to the point where it becomes paradox, because if you truly believe that, the things you write you will know, and you might even learn things by writing. They may or may not be true, but I truly feel that when Graham McNeil was writing this, he was also exploring Medjugorje. That Medjugorje in some way always existed in some form, even before it got put onto these pages. That's what I really feel like. That's what this book feels like to me. Is Graham McNeil is taking step by step. This really isn't about Uriel Ventress. This is Graham McNeil exploring Medringard. That's just the name, the moniker he took when he went to Medringard. He's almost like his own ghostwriter, I guess I would say. I think all writing is autobiography because everything is so subjective. Chapter 10. It would seem your attempt to antagonize Lord Barroso. Oh. Yeah. It would seem your attempt to antagonize Lord Barosus by shelling his pavilion was successful, said Obak Sakeo needlessly, as another flurry of shells impacted against the walls. Plumes of flame and smoke soared skyward, and Hansao laughed as he watched bodies rain down amid the rubble. Dust enveloped them, chunks of debris clattering down on the cobbled ramparts, and Hansao coughed as he swallowed a mouthful of ash. It was perhaps foolish to be this close to the front lines, but he was not so far removed from the sharp end of battle that he did not relish the cannon's roar in his ear. Yes, it does. Doesn't it? He's so predictable. It almost takes the fun out of crushing him. But my lord, he is within days of breaching the inner walls of Kalangol. How can this be to our advantage? Because he is dancing to my tune, not his own. Get an enemy to react to your designs, and he is as good as lost. I almost have him exactly where I want him. But Tormino is not so easy. He is the one we need to be wary of. I don't know what he's doing. Our scryers have seen nothing of note regarding Tormino, said Obak Sakeo. It seems he waits, simply husbanding his warriors while Barosus grinds his men to dust against our walls. I know, and that's what worries me. Tormino is too clever to simply hurl his men at us like this. He knows that Barosus has no other stratagems and is waiting for his moment to strike. We must anticipate that and preempt him, or else we are lost. Onyx leaned over the parapet and cast his gleaming silver eyes to either side of where he, Hansao, and Obak Sakeo stood. Iron warriors were ready to defend the ramparts should the bastions below fall, which, if the projected strength of the assault below was correct, was entirely likely. We are too close to the battle, he said. Hansao shook his head. No, I need to be here. I can protect you from an assassin's blade or a killer's bullet, said Onyx. But I cannot say the same for an artillery shell. An eternity of torment awaits my essence should I allow you to die while under my protection. Why should I care about your eternal torment? You wouldn't. You'd be dead. Hansao considered this for a moment and said, You may have a point there, Onyx. The demonic symbiote nodded respectfully as more screaming shells exploded against the walls below. Hansao turned, content that the bastion here was as secure as he could want. The warriors he had chosen to accompany him into the camp of Barosus commanded this section of the walls, and there were no better warriors in his grand company. He had taken one step when a flash of dark prescience made him look up and yell, Down! Whether it was by sure luck or great artifice, Hansao would never know, but a salvo of shells from the guns below impacted on the edge of the ramparts, upon which he and his warriors stood, shearing the rock clean from its supports, and a cataclysmic hammer blow. Hansao picked himself up and desperately scrambled for the safety of the escapade. Behind him, the ramparts, but it was already too late. With a grinding crack of splintering stone, he and hundreds of his finest warriors were swept down the mountainside, in a raining avalanche of rubble and blocks of sundered stone. Emerging from the smoke was like being born into hell, thought Uriel. At first, he had been frustrated, not being able to see their ultimate destination. But upon passing through the dark clouds of the mountain, and seeing it up close for the first time, he soon wished for the sight of it to be snatched from him. Stretching up to pierce the dead sky, the fortress of Hansau was a madman's conceit made real, stone laid upon stone, so that each angle was absurdly wrong, and violated the senses in a deep instinctual level. Its dark, veined walls reared up in defiance of the laws of perspective, looming and huge, with pierced garrets leaning from wallhead and spiraling, lightning sheathed spires. Blades and spikes stabbed from its glistening fabric, and black rain, like the very lifeblood of the fortress, spilled from where artillery shells had struck. Fast flowing rivers of molten level poured from glowing culverts and ran down the mountainside like streams of lava from an erupting volcano. Guns fired from the demon visaged portals, burning, demonic blood spilling from vast iron cauldrons into the screaming soldiers below. Flames danced on the ramparts, and in the mass of struggling soldiers, death and destruction stalked the battlefield this day, and they hunted well. Tens of thousands of soldiers thronged through the rubble-strewn reaches of the fortress, fighting their way up a ruined scree slope that had once been a bastion. Explosions tossed corpses through the air as buried mines swept hundreds to their deaths. And the monstrous forms of a pair of titans struggled in the rubble, crushing men and machines beneath their great footsteps as they fought amidst the flames. Uriel and the Space Marines watched the terrifying battle rage above them, the car grinding as it approached the upper platform where where it would deposit them and begin the journey back down the mountain. Emperor, protect us, breathed Vanes. It's like nothing I've ever seen before. I know, agreed Uriel, drawing his sword as the car clanged home against the platform and the bronze gate and the railing squealed open. How can we hope to survive this? Uriel turned to Vanes and said, Remember what I told you. Death and honor. If one brings the other, then it is a good death. No, hissed Vanes. No death is a good one. Not like this. None of the Space Marines moved, too in awe at the terrible and magnificent spectacle of war on a scale few had ever experienced. Uriel realized he had to get them moving before the vastness of this battle and their impulse for survival overcame their newly rekindled sense of honor. He was saved when Pausanias shouted, Come on! Get moving! Everybody off! Ingrained reflexes took over, and the Space Marines swiftly debarked from the car, chived all the way by a bellowing Pausanias. Only Uriel and Vanes remained on board. Come on, said Uriel. We have work to do. Vanes said nothing, but nodded and followed Uriel from the car, climbing up past the platform and unsheathing the crackling claws from his gauntlet. What are you doing? Called Uriel. These cars work on the principle of counterbalancing one another, explained Vanes, slicing his claws clean through the thick cables that had held the car. No one will be coming up here for a while, said Vanes, climbing back to join Uriel. Clever. The two Space Marines jogged over to where the rest of the warrior band had sequestered themselves, hidden in a fold in the rock below an overhanging bastion where they could observe the battle in relative safety. Missiles and shells crisscrossed the air, and the noise of explosions and gunfire was deafening. The mountain trembled to the footsteps of the Titans, both of which lurched heedlessly through the battle as they grappled and struck at one another. Snarling demon heads slammed together, and massive blades tore at each other's armor as whipping, barbed tails brought down swathes of the wall. "Now what?" shouted Pausanias, barely audible over the cacophony. "Now we have to get in," said Uriel. "You mean we join the assault?" asked Vanes. "Impossible!" "What choice do we have?" yelled Uriel. "We can get the hell off this mountain. I told you I'd help you get in, Ventress. But I also told you I wasn't going to get killed for your death oath." "Damn it, Vanes! We're here now. We have to keep going." Vanes looked set to reply when a salvo of shells streaked overhead and struck the lip of the overhanging bastion directly above them. Dust and debris showered them, rocks tumbling down the slopes, as if split from the mountain with a splintering crack. "Look out!" shouted Uriel, as the bastion crumbled and toppled, falling towards them in an avalanche of rubble and blocks of sundered stone. Han Sao felt rocks pummeling him as he fell, battering and threatening to crush him utterly. He trembled end over end, his senses whirling in a kaleidoscopic fury of noise and light. The breath was driven from him as he landed and rolled aside as huge tank-sized blocks of rubble smashed down around him. Choking blocks of black dust and smoke billowed, and though he felt painfully battered by the fall, he didn't feel any broken bones or ruptured organs. "Onyx!" he yelled hoarsely. "Zakeo!" "Here! I am alive!" coughed Zakeo. "As am I," said Onyx. "But I require assistance." Han Sao struggled over to where his champion lay, almost completely buried beneath a pile of jagged lumps of rawcrete, with twisted iron bars protruding from them. Onyx's torso and lower body were trapped beneath a volume of rubble that would have crushed even a power-armored warrior flat. But immaterial energies had saturated the demonic symbiote's flesh, and it was proof against such things. Han Sao gripped the debris and strained against its massive weight, but it was too great even for one as enhanced as he. Obak Zakeo joined him, the hissing mechanical arms sprouting from the armature of his back to grip the reinforcement bars. Iron warriors began picking themselves up from the rubble, those who hadn't been crushed beneath the falling masonry or otherwise killed in the bastion's collapse, lending their strength to freeing Onyx. Han Sao moved out of the way and looked around him as glowing after images of the battle flashed in his visor. He shook his head to clear it and get a better idea of where their fall from the fortress had brought them. More rubble had been dislodged from above by the thunderous battle of the nearby Titans, and Han Sao saw that they would have little difficulty in getting back to the fortress. Their lucky artillery strike had collapsed a good portion of the wall behind the bastion, that now formed a ready-made slope that led straight to the walls. That was if they survived to get back to the fortress, he thought, watching as blurry shapes approached through the swirling clouds of dust and smoke. Lime water is so refreshing. Lime water, I'm telling you, once it hits the markets, people are going to go nuts. Just the lime and some water. There's got to be a way to market that. The kids are gonna go psycho about it. They're gonna go psycho. They're gonna go psycho mode. That's what they say now, psycho mode. Kumbaya. Han Sao watched the space marine emerge from the smoke, his blue armor dust-covered and battered. His heart lurched as the warrior snarled and drew a shimmering blade. One of the false Emperor's warriors? Here? His surprise almost cost him his life, as the blade sang for his neck, and he was barely able to parry it with his axe, dragging away from the turn stroke of the Space Marine's blade. His axe screamed as its warrior's soul roared to life, and Han Sao saw that the attacking warrior's blue armor was devoid of all insignia or markings. A renegade? A mercenary? Was this Tornino's doing? Rallying the renegade scum that skulked in the mountains to his cause? But he had no more time to wonder at the warrior's origins, as the blade stabbed for him once more. "Iron warriors!" he bellowed. "With me!" Uriel slashed at the Iron Warrior again, but his every stroke was parried by a huge war axe with a glossy black-toothed blade. His foe shouted to his warriors, and more shapes emerged from the dust, swords and axes raised, and bolters piercing the smoke with barking muzzle flashes. "Emperor, guide my blade!" he shouted as he attacked again. "He has no power here!" retorted the Iron Warrior as he spun his axe around and attacked. Uriel sidestepped and brought his sword around in a beheading stroke. But his opponent was not there, rolling beneath the blow and swinging his axe. Uriel hurled himself flat, the screaming blade slashing centimeters from his armor. He rolled aside as the axe hammered down, the earth shaking in fury at its impact. Uriel kicked out, driving the Iron Warrior to his knees, and slicing his sword in a wide arc towards his head. The tip of his blade caught the Iron Warrior's helm, and sent him tumbling down the slope. He scrambled to his feet as more Space Marines joined the fray, and the vast shadow of the battering Titans engulfed them. The fury of the Devil Machine's combat dwarfed this one, but for all that it was equally brutal and merciless. Vicious, short-range firefights and melees broke out, bolters roaring and grunts of pain and anger sounding as explosive shells cracked open armor, and blades tore at flesh. He drew back his sword to gut an Iron Warrior, but a lashing coil of energy snaked out and ensnared his arm. Pain roared up, and it was all he could do to keep hold of his sword, as flaring bursts of agony coursed through the length of the energy coil. Uriel dropped to his knees as a giant, wide-shouldered Iron Warrior drew near, massive mechanized arms snapping from his shoulders, and the snaking whip of his energy attached to yet another of his lurched claws. "You dare attack the master of Kolan Gol? You will die!" roared the warrior, his voice ugly and crackling. A wash of flame shot from the combat, and Uriel was caught in the sickening stench of cooked meat. Once again, the earth heaved, and a gargantuan foot slammed down against the mountainside, not 3 meters from Uriel, leaving a deep crater in its wake. He saw the massive Titan towering above them as he fought against the crippling pain lashing in waves from the energy whip. While the whip-armed claw held him immobile with agony, the lumbering Iron Warrior's free hands unsheathed the crude, brutal, but no doubt effective chainsaw-bladed axe. "Obat Zakeo!" screamed a voice. But Uriel could not see who had shouted through the pain screeching around his nervous system. Gunshots burst against the Iron Warrior's armor, and he lashed out with his axe. You? Laughed the Iron Warrior. You were under my blade once, slave, and escaped. You will not do so again. For the briefest second, his attention shifted from Uriel, and that was all the distraction he needed. He swept up his sword, hacking through the energy whip, and the pain vanished, leaving him drained, but free of its incapacitating agony. Uriel pushed himself to his feet, seeing Colonel Leonid and Sergeant Ellard facing off against the Iron Warrior. Lasbolts hammered his bulky body, but his debased power armor could withstand such trifles, and he roared, swinging his axe for Leonid's midriff. The colonel jumped back, stumbling on loose rubble, and fell to the ground. Obak Sakeo closed in for the kill, but Ellard leapt upon the Iron Warrior, pummeling his fist against his head. Ellard was a big man, but next to the Iron Warrior he was a child, and Obak Sakeo ripped him from his back and hurled him away. Uriel stepped in and hammered his sword across the Iron Warrior's shoulders. The blade crackled as it hacked through the warrior's ceramite plates. Obak Sakeo swung his axe in a vicious arc at Uriel's groin. But the blow never landed as the ground shook and cracked, molten metal spewing. As the crashing footsteps of the battling titans finally split the mountain, white-hot metal hissed and spat as it spilled out onto the rocks, rendering them down to slag in seconds. Uriel scrambled away from the widening crack on the ground, sheathing his sword as he saw that there was no way his opponent could reach him across the gulf of liquid metal. Rolling clouds of bitter smoke gusted from the river of molten metal, and Uriel scrambled away from its intolerable heat, Leonid and Ellard clambering over the rocks to join him. "This is Uriel Ventress," he shouted, hoping the box beat attached to his larynx was still functioning. "If anyone can still hear me, make for the breach above us, now!" Bolters roared behind him as the crash of explosions almost drowned his order. But as he climbed through the blinding clouds of steam and smoke, he could see the shadowy forms of the warrior band climbing towards him. The breach was above, barely 30 meters away, and the rubble-strewn sides of the fortress, a beacon that called him onwards. They had done it. They had found a way in. Poor Obak Zakeo. Poor Obaks. And here's what the Iron Warriors look like. They are debased. Compared to the mighty Uriel Ventress. I think in modern lore, the Iron Warriors have kind of almost become like the staple legion. They're just, I mean, there's the 13th Legion, right? Or the Abaddon, whatever they're called, the Black Legion. There's them. They're basically like the stormtroopers of fucking Warhammer now. But probably close second to that would be the Plague Marines, and then eventually so that's kind of how the Iron Warriors are, though. I think okay, basically everything's just been homogenized in the new lore, but the Iron Warriors were special because they kind of had their own like planets like this. That's what made them like a special sort of legion, is they had these insane fortress worlds. And the reason why that's crazy. I mean, the closest thing to this, right, would be like, I mean, You can't even call the Night Lords fleets. They have no industrial capacity, so they have nothing. But the closest thing to it would be like Huron Blackhearts, like little satellite fortress planet moon thing. Because you can't have an Imperium of Chaos. You can't have an Imperium of Chaos. The reason why is you can't have evil mailmen. As soon as you have evil mailmen, everything falls apart. What are they going to do with the package? Are they going to deliver it? I think delivering the package is the last thing they're going to do, right? That because chaos is the opposite of order. But the Iron Warriors have almost used. They've industrialized brutality. Okay, that's really that because it's almost easy to compare the Imperial Fist with the Iron Warriors. Um, they're both masters of siegecraft. The Iron Warriors are more about bringing down fortresses, and the Imperial Fists are more about creating them. But they both make fortresses, and they both tear down fortresses, and you have to know how to do both things to do either. So I want to say that the Iron Warriors, their siegecraft, it seems to be on a grander scale. I would say that their siegecraft is more of a grander scale, whereas Imperial Fists still have the Space Marine spearhead doctrine. They still have, and they shall know no fear. So they have less men. The Imperial Fist, a chapter against the Legion. They have less men than the Iron Warriors if we were going to compare them. But they still have they it would still be a great fight because they can do a spearhead, whereas the Iron Warriors work on the vast overall like meta size of the war and like basically the Iron Warriors want to expand their fronts, where the Imperial Fists want to make the front as pure and direct as possible. That I think would be the difference between the two. The shattered remnants of this part of the ramparts were eerily deserted. The noise of battle muted from here. As Uriel pulled himself over the tattered lip of stone and the aid of the orange steel rebars, he rolled to his feet, alert for danger, but finding none. The brooding presence of the fortress still towered above him, but he kept his eyes averted from its monstrous geometries for now, turning and helping the remainder of their force onto the battlements. The walls swept around the mountain, curving and angled, seemingly at random. Hordes of human soldiers and mutants firing from the embattled ramparts into the masses of attackers below. Thousands of warriors fought in the breach, looking from here like some great serpent that heaved and convulsed as it pulsed its way meter by meter up the rubble slopes. Pausanias and Vanes climbed up, followed by Leonid and Ellard, and the rest of the Iron Warrior band. Uriel could scarce believe it. They were within the walls of the fortress. Throne of Terra, breathed Pausanias. That was bloody work. It's not over yet, cautioned Uriel, turning and more fully surveying his surroundings. A row of great archways led deeper into the fortress, each one as tall as a battle titan, and ringed with grotesque carvings that squirmed within the rock, as though the unquiet matter of the blocks was reshaping itself as they watched. Which way? Asked Vanes, as the last of the Space Marines climbed up to the ramparts. I don't know, admitted Uriel. There's nothing to choose between them. Then we've nothing to lose, whichever one we take, pointed out Vanes, heading towards the middle archway. I suppose, said Uriel, though a gut feeling told him that there was something different about this archway. He could not put his finger on what, but since he had no better idea of which one to take, he set off after Vanes. The Space Marines followed him, bolters leveled in cautious apprehension. Vanes waited for him at the entrance to the archway, and Uriel passed beneath its Stygian immensity. He sketched the sign of the Aquila across his chest, hearing a distant pounding like the slow heartbeat of a sleeping monster. We are in the belly of the beast once more, Uriel said. Onyx ghosted over the lip of the ruined bastion, his bronze claws sliding slowly from his flesh. His silver eyes scanned the battlements for any sign of the renegades, but they were nowhere to be seen. Moving like a shadow, Onyx tasted the air, the crawling silver veins beneath his skin burning brighter as he channeled the demonic energy within him to tracking the intruders. His vision shifted into the realms of sight, beyond the keen of mortal men, where that which had already come to pass could be seen by listening to the echoes in the air. He watched as shadowy forms climbed over the ramparts, and much the way as he had just done, many warriors led by one whose soul burned brightly with purpose, and another whose soul was withered and dead, as though formed from swirling particles of smoke. Their forms were ethereal and insubstantial, but Onyx could see them as clearly as though they had been here, and watch them arrive. They had passed this way but minutes ago, their phantasmal echoes walking from the battlements and heading in the direction of the monstrous archways carved into the mountainside. Onyx watched as the ghostly figures were swallowed up by the whispering darkness of the archways and sheathed his claws. He would need to take another route into the fortress to hunt the intruders. For if Kalan Ghul had lured them into the Bedlam portals, there was a good chance they were already dead. The journey through the darkened archway was one that Uriel knew he would never forget. The sensation of being spied upon by every square centimeter of the wall was intolerable. And Uriel knew that they were whispering vile, terrible things. Dishonor, disgrace, failure. This, at least, he felt like he could bear, having already seen the most terrible things imaginable in the presence of the Nightbringer, but still. The twilight darkness seemed to go on forever, and Uriel soon lost track of how long they had been traveling in the damnable tunnel. It doesn't stop. It goes on and on. Imperator! Does this ever end? Growled Vanes, as they delved further and further into the never-ending darkness. I don't know, said Uriel. I get the feeling when we do not travel normal paths here, we can trust nothing. Not even the evidence of our own senses. Then how will we know when we found what we're looking for? You won't. We will have to trust the Emperor. Will show us the way, said Uriel, irritated by Vane's constant questions. Vane shook his head in exasperation. I knew I should have never come on this mission. It was doomed from the start. Yes, doomed. Only death awaits. Then why did you come? Snapped Uriel, rounding on the former Raven Guard his temper fraying. He hates you and will betray you. Damned if I can remember, snarled Vanes, his voice centimeter from Uriel's. Perhaps I thought you had more of an idea about how you planned to get in here and find what we came for.
He doesn't. He will soon see you dead.
Damn you, Vanes! Why must you always undermine me? Said Uriel, hearing soft, malicious laughter and the voices of the walls growing louder in his ears. Every step on this journey, you have done nothing but tell us we are on a fool's errand. That may be so, but we are space marines, trapped on a demon world, and it is our sacred task to fight the enemies of mankind, wherever they may be.
Not anymore. Give in. You are worthless.
Don't you understand? We are not space marines, shouted Vanes, the reflected blue light of the tunnel glittering in his eyes. Not anymore. We are all outcasts, shunned and banished from our chapters. We owe neither them nor the Emperor anything anymore. And I, for one, am getting sick of hearing your sanctimonious voice telling me what I ought to be doing.
Yes, kill him. What does he do you anyway?
Uriel shook his head as Vanes slapped a gauntlet on his shoulder and said, Where is your chapter badge, Ventress? I don't see it. Does anyone else? What happened to you, Vanes? Asked Uriel, angrily shrugging off the hands of his shoulders and gripping the hilt of his sword. How did you become so damaged?
Because he has no honor. Because he deserves to die.
The voices insinuated themselves within his head and lodged upon his tongue, just aching to be said for the sake of malice and spite. Uriel clamped his hands to his ears as a measure of understanding forced its way past the fog of bitterness that filled his mind. The voices clouded his head, louder now that their subterfuge was unmasked. Uriel stumbled and reached out to steady himself, his hand brushing against the wall, its undulating substance wet and fluid. He dropped to his knees and shouted, Get out of my head!
No, worthless you, meaningless you, insignificant you, unremember you.
Uriel? Are you all right? What's going on? Shouted Pausanias, running over to where his captain knelt. Vanes walked away from Uriel, shaking his head and clutching at his temples in pain. What the hell is going on? He yelled, as the roar of voices, thousands of them, swelled in volume and filled the tunnel.
Kill. It's such a friendly word. It's the only way.
Don't listen to them! Shouted Uriel. Shut them out! The other space marines now felt the full power of the lunatic voices, dropping their weapons as the urge to turn them upon themselves grew unbearable. A shot rang out, and one of their warrior band, a Doom Eagle, toppled forwards, his entire skull little more than a charred, blood-stained basin. Uriel threw his gun as he felt the muscles of his arm twitch in response to the voices, fighting their urgings.
It is hopeless. No point in fighting. Nothing can stand against the majesty of chaos.
Uriel fought the urge to curl up and give in, remembering past glories where victory had meant something concrete, when the defeat of terrible forces had achieved something meaningful. He pictured the great victory on Tarsus Ultra, the defeat of Casimir de Valtos, and the capture of the Alpha Psyker and Epsilon Regalis. With each victory remembered, The power of the voices diminished, and the despair they fostered kept at bay by his powerful sense of worth and purpose. He staggered to his feet, seeing Pausanias disengage the Prometheum unit from his flamer and flip a fragmentation grenade from his dispenser into his hand. "No!" shouted Uriel, and kicked the grenade from his sergeant's hand. Pausanias rose up to his full height, his face twisted in a snarl of anger, tears coursing down his face. "Why? Why won't you let me die? I deserve to die."
He does, let him die. Let him die, you hate him anyway.
"No!" gasped Uriel, fighting the deadly power of the voices. "You have to fight on." "I can't," wailed Pausanias, holding up his silver arm before him. "Don't you see? I have to die." Uriel gripped his friend's shoulders as another shot echoed in the tunnel, and another warrior succumbed to the suicidal lure of the voices. "Remember how you got that arm?" shouted Uriel. "You helped save the world with Pavonis. You stood before a star god and defied it. You are a hero, Pausanias. All of you are heroes. You are the greatest warriors this galaxy has ever seen. You are stronger, more courageous, and more resourceful than any mortal man."
No, 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 no.
Uriel released Pausanias and moved from warrior to warrior, shouting at them as he went, his voice growing louder as he warmed himself to his own theme. "Do not forget who you are," he yelled. Over the fury of whispers. "You are Space Marines! Warriors of the Emperor of Mankind, and you fight the dark powers wherever you find them. You are strong, proud, and you are warriors. You have fought for centuries, and you honor your life. Let none dispute it." He drew his sword and activated the blade, which rippled with fiery energies and raised it high. "Every foe we slay means something," shouted Uriel, slashing at the walls of the tunnel with every word. "Every battle we win means something. We mean something. Remember every battle you have fought, every foe vanquished, every honor won. They stand for everything we were created for. Remember them, and the voices will have no power over you." The slithering carvings from the walls screeched in frustration, retreating to the depths of the rock before Uriel's bright blade. As his words undid their masquerades, a new sound rose to banish the hateful whispers, the sounds of voices being raised in honor of great victories of the Imperium, the storming of Corinth, the Iron Cage, Phoenix Island, the liberation of Vaughan, Armageddon, the fall of Charendis, Elgin Salient, the battle of Macrogg, and 100 others rang against the foul temptations of their voices. The walls becoming dark and solid as the volume of the warrior's band grew silent. Uriel almost wept in triumph as the darkness of the walls retreated, and the illusory nature of the tunnel fell away to reveal the softly glowing exit before them. The soulless light of Medjugorje filled the tunnel, and though it promised nothing but death and emptiness, Uriel rejoiced to see it. "This way!" shouted Uriel, scooping up his bolter before sagging and staggering, exhausted, towards the tunnel's exit. The warrior band gathered their weapons and followed from the hellish mouth of madness. Once clear of the tunnels of despair, Uriel saw that they had barely penetrated the walls of the fortress at all. The Iron Warrior, with a coruscating energy whip, had called this place Kalangul, and as Uriel cast a wary glance towards the hungry maw of the tunnel they had just left, he wondered if it was a name given to the fortress, or if one it had taken itself. A potent malice saturated the air, and a sense of ancient sentience lurking in the very rocks and mortar of this place. The Space Marines, Colonel Leonid and Sergeant Ellard, collapsed as they felt the dark of the mountain shake their heads clear of the last vestiges of the tunnel's evil. It had left them on a high ledge at the head of a long, winding set of carven black stairs overlooking the madness of the interior of Honsau's fastness. Sprawling towers, manufactories, and darkly arched cloisters jostled for space amid the tall statues and spiked ring redoubts. Dark tiled roofs and insane structures of non-Aleutian geometries that hurt the eyes and violated the senses were crammed within the jagged, hostile architecture of the fortress, twisting and gibbet-hung boulevards, winding between them in impossible ways. A wan, emerald light held court over it all, pierced with streamers of sickly orange fires burning from forges and melancholy temples. Streams of liquid metal ran in basalt troughs through the fortress, the reflected heat bathing everything in droplets of glistening metallic condensation. Copper stained gargoyles vented coils of steam, and tall, crooked towers of black bricks spewed choking clouds of pollutants into the atmosphere. From great, piston-heaving power plants, great figures shuffled through the city, and dark, slithering things slipped like shadows through the nightmare streets of the fortress, towards the heart of the mountains, where a single, rearing tower of iron stood, its dimensions immense. It speared the clouds above, a swirling mass of bruised, vaporous energies encircling its tallest peak. Thousands of arced firing slits pierced the tower, its base out of sight, behind the belching forges that clustered before it. Uriel knew that the master of this horrible place must dwell within that awful tower, and understood with certainty that this was their ultimate destination. Flocks of delirium specters wheeled above the dread tower, their raucous cries echoing weirdly from its tall spires and nameless garrets. Tall peaks of black mountains swooped high above them, and though it seemed they walked for many kilometers through the rock of the mountain, the noise of battle was close, as though they traveled only a little way. "How can that be?" said Vanes, guessing Uriel's thoughts. "I don't know," replied Uriel. "We cannot trust our senses." Uriel listened. About the tunnel, and the things that were said. "It doesn't matter. It was the voices. They got inside us and made us say those things." Vanes shook his head. "What were they? Demons? Ghosts? I don't know. But we defeated them, Vanes." "You defeated them. I saw through what they were trying to do to us. I almost gave in. I wanted to." "But you had the strength to defeat them," said Uriel. "That strength came from inside you. I just reminded you of it."